Easy now. Don't move past this too fast. That feeling crawling up your spine, that's recognition, because what you're staring at right now, what you finally see, is the one thing they prayed would stay buried, not hidden, not misunderstood, never seen. You weren't supposed to find this. You weren't supposed to connect that dot to this moment. You weren't supposed to notice the silence change pitch, the smiles tighten, the timing get sloppy. But you did, and the moment you did, the whole illusion cracked. See, they didn't fear your anger. They didn't fear your sadness. They didn't even fear your rebellion. What terrified them was the possibility that one day you'd become calm enough to see clearly. Because clarity is lethal. Clarity doesn't scream, it doesn't rush, it doesn't announce itself, it just stands there, undeniable. This proof isn't just information, it's a confession written in behavior, in patterns, in the things they rushed to erase and the things they forgot to clean up. It's in who panicked, who went quiet, who suddenly needed distance, who changed the rules after you learned how to win the game. They always tell you the truth right before they think you're too weak to use it. You see the paradox now, don't you? They needed you naive to control you, but they needed you strong to survive what they put you through. So they created something they couldn't predict. Pain didn't break you, it trained you. Isolation didn't empty you, it refined you. Confusion didn't weaken you. It taught you how to read between realities. You became fluent in contradiction, saint when restraint was required, psychopath when mercy became a liability, angel when silence disarmed them, demon when precision was necessary. That's the version they never planned for. They thought proof would destroy you, that seeing the full picture would shatter whatever hope you had left. That once you realized how deliberate it all was, the timing, the manipulation, the quiet agreements made without you, you'd collapse under the weight of it. They were wrong, because what they never understood is that you were forged in ambiguity. You lived in unanswered questions so long that certainty feels like oxygen. When the proof surfaced, it didn't hurt, it clicked. Like a final puzzle piece sliding into place, not with chaos, but with relief. Oh, your mind said, so that's why. And that's the moment everything shifted. You stopped chasing explanations. You stopped needing validation. You stopped arguing with people who were already exposed by your silence. You didn't confront them. You didn't announce it. You didn't seek revenge. You did something far more unsettling. You adjusted your behavior, and that terrified them. Because unpredictable people aren't dangerous. Unpredictable people who understand the system are catastrophic. They can't read you anymore. They can't anticipate your moves. They can't tell if you're disengaged or setting a trap. And the proof? The proof isn't just what you found. The proof is how they changed after you found it. The sudden defensiveness, the over-explanations no one asked for, the moral speeches from people who used to mock your boundaries, the urgency to reframe the past now that you're no longer confused by it. That's not coincidence. That's containment. They're trying to put the genie back in the bottle, hoping you'll doubt your own perception, hoping you'll soften it. Water it down. Call it a misunderstanding so they can breathe again. But you're past that phase. You've crossed into the dangerous calm, the state where you no longer need to be believed because you know. And knowing rewires you. It slows your pulse, sharpens your intuition, turns patience into a weapon. This is where evolution happens. Not in rage, not in grief, but in quiet recalibration. You don't burn bridges anymore. You let people walk across them and note who set them on fire from the other side. You don't announce exits. You simply stop being accessible to those who mistook access for entitlement. You don't seek justice. You become inconvenient to lie to. And that's why this proof matters. Not because it exposes them, but because it finalizes you. They prayed you'd never see it, because once you do, you stop being moldable. You stop being reactive. You stop being emotionally exploitable. You become something colder, smarter, freer, not heartless, selective, not cruel, precise, not broken, irreversible. This is the version that walks forward without looking back, not because the past doesn't matter, but because it already served its purpose. You weren't meant to stay blind. You were meant to see, and then outgrow the room where the lie was told. And here's the part they still don't understand. Seeing the truth didn't make you bitter. It made you dangerously honest with yourself. You stopped romanticizing the past. You stopped editing memories to protect people who never protected you. You stopped asking, why me? And started asking, what did this build in me? That question alone separates survivors from architects. Because once you ask that, pain stops being a wound and becomes a blueprint. They thought the proof would make you collapse into rage or drown in grief. They thought you'd spiral, lash out, self-destruct. That's what usually happens when someone realizes how calculated the betrayal was, how coordinated the silence felt, how many people knew and chose comfort over courage. But you didn't explode. You went still. And stillness is terrifying to people who rely on noise to hide their guilt. You see, chaos is predictable. Pain is predictable. Trauma responses are predictable. That's why systems learn how to manage broken people. They know how to soothe them, provoke them, redirect them, label them. They have whole manuals for that. What they don't have a manual for is someone who integrates the pain instead of bleeding from it. You didn't deny what happened. You didn't numb it. You didn't rewrite it into a victim fantasy. You metabolized it. And now your presence carries something unfamiliar, something they can't name but can feel. Conversations change when you enter the room. People hesitate. They overthink their words. They test you with jokes, probing questions, fake concern, subtle dominance plays, because they sense it. You're no longer operating from need. Need is what made you manageable. Hope made you pliable. Trust made you accessible. But now you operate from choice. You choose when to speak. You choose what to reveal. You choose who gets access to your mind, your time, your energy. And that choice terrifies anyone who benefited from your openness before. The proof didn't just show you what they did. It showed you who you were when it happened and who you are now. Back then, you looked for consistency in people. Now you look for alignment. Back then, you gave the benefit of the doubt. Now you watch patterns repeat and call that the answer. Back then, you tried to be understood. Now you understand, and let others misunderstand you if that's safer. That's not coldness. That's evolution. This is the phase where duality becomes your edge. You can be warm and unreachable in the same breath. You can be kind without being compliant. You can be silent without being passive. You can sit across from someone who once had power over you and feel nothing. No urge to explain, no hunger for acknowledgement, no desire to expose them publicly. Because exposure isn't power, detachment is. They prayed you'd never see the proof because once you do, you stop arguing with reality. And people who stop arguing with reality become immune to gaslighting, manipulation, and fear-based control. You're not angry anymore, not in the way they expect. Your anger matured. It learned restraint. It learned timing. It learned when to stay holstered and when to make eye contact without blinking. That's the kind of anger that doesn't shout. It waits. And waiting doesn't mean plotting revenge. It means letting consequences find their own path while you keep moving forward, cleaner, sharper, lighter. They're still living inside the lie, still maintaining it, still remembering who they have to be around you. You're not. And that asymmetry changes everything. You're no longer trying to win. You're no longer trying to be right. You're no longer trying to fix what never wanted to be honest. You're becoming ungovernable by the old rules. This is the phase where people from your past start resurfacing, not boldly, but indirectly. Liking things, asking neutral questions, testing the waters, fishing for reassurance that you're still the same person they once knew how to handle. You're not, and you don't need to announce that either. Your energy does it for you. The proof closed a chapter, but it didn't make you cynical. It made you strategic. You no longer assume malice everywhere, but you also don't assume innocence. You observe, you listen, you let people reveal themselves at their own pace. And when they do, you believe them the first time. That's the final upgrade they never accounted for. Not rage, not revenge, not exposure, clarity, and clarity is irreversible. Once you've seen what you've seen, you can never be folded back into the smaller version of yourself that made them comfortable. You've outgrown the narrative, the role, the expectations they quietly assigned to you. You didn't just survive the truth, you integrated it. And now, you walk forward carrying something rare. A calm that can't be shaken, a mind that can't be misled, and a presence that no longer asks for permission to exist. They prayed you'd never see it, not because it would destroy you, but because it would finish forging you. And here's the part nobody warned them about. Once you see it, you don't just know, you recalibrate. Your nervous system rewires itself around truth. Your instincts sharpen. Your tolerance for nonsense evaporates. You stop mistaking familiarity for safety and history for loyalty. You realize how many people weren't walking with you. They were feeding off the version of you that hadn't woken up yet. That realization doesn't make you paranoid. It makes you selective. You no longer rush to explain yourself because explanations are for people who genuinely want to understand. You no longer overgive to prove your worth because worth doesn't beg to be acknowledged. You no longer chase closure because clarity already gave it to you. The proof did something subtle but devastating to the old power dynamics. It removed your emotional dependency on outcomes. And once outcomes lose their grip on you, fear has nowhere to land. They used to rely on your hope that things would change. They relied on your patience. They relied on your empathy outpacing your boundaries. They relied on you doubting yourself. That was the leverage. Now there's nothing to pull on. You don't flinch when silence appears. You don't rush to fix tension that isn't yours. You don't scramble when people withdraw affection as a tactic, because you recognize it. You've seen this movie before, and now you know how it ends. You understand that some people don't want resolution. They want control through confusion. They want you second-guessing your memory, your intuition, your interpretation of events. They want you stuck replaying moments while they move forward untouched. But the proof shattered that loop. You stopped replaying. You started integrating. And integration is the moment trauma loses its authority over your future. You didn't become harder. You became denser, less porous, less absorbent to other people's chaos. You stopped carrying emotions that weren't yours. You stopped internalizing disrespect and disguised as misunderstanding. You learned the most dangerous lesson of all. Some people don't change because they don't need to. They already got what they wanted from you. That knowledge doesn't turn you bitter. It turns you precise. You can still love. You can still care. You can still be generous. But now it's intentional. You love with awareness. You care with discernment. You give with conditions rooted in self-respect. And that version of you, that version is impossible to exploit. They feel it when they speak to you. The dynamic is different. Their old tactics slide off. Their jokes don't land the same. Their guilt trips fall flat. Their attempts to reframe history feel clumsy and desperate. Because you're not engaging from the same altitude anymore. You're looking down at the pattern from above. And patterns don't lie. You see how the timing always benefited them. You see how accountability was always delayed, redirected, or minimized. You see how your pain was inconvenient, but never urgent to them. That's the proof. Not a document, not a message, not a confession. Behavior over time. That's what they prayed you'd never piece together. Because once you do, you stop negotiating with people who only understand leverage. You stop explaining boundaries to those who enjoy crossing them. You stop mistaking endurance for strength. And something else happens. Something quiet, but profound. Your standards rise, not just for others, but for yourself. You start asking harder questions. Why did I tolerate that? Why did I minimize myself there? Why did I stay silent when my intuition was screaming? And instead of shaming yourself, you answer honestly. Because shame keeps you small. Understanding sets you free. You forgive the version of you who didn't know what you know now. You recognize that survival required compromise at the time. You needed connection. You needed hope. You needed to believe people were better than they showed you. That doesn't make you weak. That makes you human. But now you're awake. Awareness is the line they can't cross with you anymore. You don't announce your growth. You don't weaponize the truth. You don't seek vindication. You let life rearrange itself around the new rules you live by. People who respect you adapt. People who benefited from your confusion drift away. People who thrived on your silence get exposed by your absence. And you don't chase any of them. Because you're building something quieter, sturdier, irreversible. A life where access is earned. A mind that cannot be gaslit. A heart that remains open without being naive. That's the final paradox. You didn't lose your softness. You learned where to place it. They prayed you'd never see the proof, because seeing it didn't just reveal them. It freed you. And freedom doesn't make noise. It moves on. And once you're free, something unsettling happens for everyone who ever counted on your blindness. You stop reacting. Not because you don't feel, but because you finally understand what feeling is useful for and what was only ever used against you. You realize how often your emotions were mined like a resource, how empathy made you predictable, how loyalty made you patient past reason, how silence was interpreted not as dignity, but as permission. That's when the internal switch flips. You no longer ask yourself, how do I fix this? You ask, why am I even here? That question alone collapses entire relationships. Because the truth is, many of them only functioned when you were willing to carry confusion for the group. When you were the one who absorbed tension, explained away disrespect, softened truths so others wouldn't feel exposed. You were the buffer. And once the buffer becomes conscious, the system destabilizes. They feel it immediately. They can't quite name it, but something about you no longer bends. Your tone doesn't shift to accommodate discomfort. Your energy doesn't chase harmony at your own expense. Your presence no longer seeks permission. You're still calm, but it's a cold calm now. Not numb, not cruel, just grounded in self-trust. That's when people start projecting. They'll call you distant, arrogant, changed, hard to read. They'll say you've become different, as if that's an accusation. But what they're really saying is, you no longer make me feel safe in my version of the story. And that was always the risk of you seeing the proof. Because proof doesn't just expose lies, it removes dependency on narratives. You don't need their explanations anymore. You don't need closure conversations. You don't need apologies wrapped in conditions. You've already accepted the truth that matters most. If they wanted to be honest, they would have been before you caught on. And that realization doesn't harden your heart. It sharpens your discernment. You stop rewarding potential. You stop waiting for consistency that never comes. You stop mistaking intermittent care for love. You start honoring patterns instead of promises. And patterns are brutally honest. They show you who shows up when it costs them nothing, and who disappears the moment accountability enters the room. They show you who benefits from your exhaustion and who respects your rest. They show you who needs you confused and who doesn't fear your clarity. That's the separation, and once it happens, there's no undoing it. You don't argue anymore because arguing assumes mutual respect for truth. You don't chase understanding because being misunderstood by dishonest people is safer. You don't over-explain because explanation is an invitation to negotiate reality. You simply adjust your access. That's the move they never see coming. Not confrontation, not exposure, not revenge. Withdrawal of emotional supply. You stop feeding cycles that survive on your engagement. You stop volunteering your nervous system to environments that profit from your stress. You stop making yourself available to people who only value you when you're useful, agreeable, or uncertain. And something remarkable happens in that space. Your intuition gets louder. Without the noise of other people's expectations, your internal signal strengthens. You start trusting the pause, the hesitation, the gut feeling that whispers, something's off. You no longer override it for the sake of peace. You protect it like intelligence. Because that intuition, that's what led you to the proof in the first place. They didn't fear your intelligence. They feared your perception. Because perception sees what logic can be trained to ignore. Perception notices timing, energy shifts. What's said and what's avoided. Perception connects dots people thought were invisible. That's why they tried to keep you busy, emotional, distracted, overextended, always reacting to the next issue instead of standing back and observing the full pattern. But you stepped out of the maze, and now you see it from above. You see how certain conflicts were engineered to keep you self-doubting. You see how support was conditional, affection transactional, concern performative. You see how your growth threatened dynamics built on your stagnation. And here's the quiet truth. Not everyone wanted you healed. Some needed you manageable. The proof stripped that illusion away. And now you move differently. You don't rush connections. You don't overshare. You don't reveal plans to people who haven't earned insight into your direction. You let time test loyalty. You let pressure expose character. You let absence reveal who actually notices your presence. And you're okay with the results. Because you're no longer afraid of being alone. You're afraid of betraying your awareness. That's the final evolution. You don't need the world to change. You changed how you relate to it. And that's why they prayed you'd never see the proof. Because the moment you did, You stopped being someone who could be steered by guilt, hope, or confusion. You became someone who moves with quiet authority, someone who knows when to speak, and when silence is the loudest statement, someone who doesn't need to win, because you already walked out of the game. And once you do that, they can never touch you the same way again. Easy now. Don't shift your weight. You feel that pressure in the air? That's not fear, that's attention. Someone leaned in a little too close, trying to understand what shouldn't be understandable. They didn't come at you loud. They didn't challenge you openly. They didn't risk their own hands getting dirty. No, they hired a professional, a person whose job is to end questions, not create them, a person trained to reduce lives to patterns, routines, weaknesses, receipts, a person who believes everyone collapses under enough observation. They hired a PI to end you, and he came back with questions. That's when the room went quiet, because you weren't supposed to do that. You weren't supposed to bend the narrative. You weren't supposed to stay unreadable under pressure. You weren't supposed to exist as a contradiction. But you do. You always have. See, they expected a monster or a saint, a sinner with a paper trail, or a hero with a halo. They expected something that fit into a report. Instead, the file came back unfinished. No clean motive, no predictable habits, no exploitable weakness, just anomalies, gaps, silence, moments that don't line up, witnesses who disagree, time stamps that don't explain you. That's when the PI stopped hunting and started studying. Because you don't move like prey. You don't speak like someone hiding. You don't live like someone afraid of being found. You live like someone who already survived the ending. They watched you long enough to expect decay and found evolution. They looked for desperation and found patience. They searched for trauma leaking out of your seams and found control so tight it felt unnatural. That's the paradox that rattled them. You carry damage like a weapon that's already been sharpened. You hold pain the way surgeons hold steel. Calm, precise, unflinching. You don't flinch when the spotlight hits you because you were forged under interrogation lights long before anyone started asking questions. You learned early that chaos is loud, power is quiet. So when someone watches you too closely, they don't see panic, they see rhythm, and rhythm terrifies analysts more than noise ever could, because noise burns out. Patterns can be exploited, but rhythm adapts. They wanted to catch you slipping. Instead, they caught you waiting for nothing, waiting for everything, existing without urgency. That's when the PI realized something was off. You don't react when you're provoked. You don't accelerate when chased. You don't collapse when isolated. You do something far more dangerous. You observe back. You let people reveal themselves around you. You let systems show their cracks. You let enemies overextend while you remain still. Saint to some, psychopath to others, angel in one memory, demon in another, and none of them are wrong. That's the part that shattered the report. Because you aren't one thing, you're a range. You can be gentle without being weak. You can be ruthless without being reckless. You can love without bleeding. You can destroy without rage. That's not instability, that's mastery. They wanted a reason to erase you. Instead, they found a reason to hesitate. Because people who don't need validation, people who don't chase revenge, people who don't announce their next move, those are the ones you can't end cleanly. You don't escalate, you don't threaten, you don't warn. You become inevitable. The PI felt it before he understood it. That quiet shift when the hunter realizes the environment itself has changed, when observation stops feeling safe, when curiosity starts feeling personal. He saw that you don't leave chaos behind you. You leave clarity. And clarity is dangerous to anyone living off confusion. They asked him, "Can you finish this?" He didn't say no. He asked why. Why you don't behave like someone with a target on their back. Why pressure doesn't distort you. Why your silence carries more weight than most people's threats. Why the closer he got, the less certain he became. Because you're not hiding from your past. You integrated it. You didn't run from pain. You let it restructure you. You didn't numb yourself. You refined yourself. You didn't let the darkness rot you. You trained it. That's why attempts to end you always turn into investigations. That's why surveillance turns into fascination. That's why enemies start second-guessing their own conclusions. They thought they were dealing with a problem. They discovered a presence. And presence doesn't disappear when attacked. It deepens. So now they're stuck. Too aware to ignore you. Too uncertain to move on you. Too exposed to escalate without consequences. All because you learned the one rule that breaks every system. Unpredictability isn't chaos. It's controlled contradiction. You are proof that evolution doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just watches and lets the world reveal its hand. And that's why the PI didn't come back with an ending. He came back with questions. Because somewhere between observing your silence and measuring your restraint, he realized the truth they weren't ready to hear. You don't look like someone who can be ended. You look like someone who already was, and came back rewritten. And once that realization lands, it doesn't leave. It sits there, heavy. It crawls under the skin of everyone who thought this was going to be simple. Because now the question isn't how to end you. The question is what happens if they try. They rewind the footage again and again, looking for cracks, a bad habit, a reckless indulgence, a moment where emotion hijacks logic. But all they find is composure that feels earned the hard way. You don't overreact. You don't overshare. You don't posture. You move like someone who learned early that survival isn't loud and dominance doesn't need witnesses. That's when the paranoia begins. Because people like you don't announce phases. They don't telegraph growth. They don't brag about resilience. They just arrive different. The PI noticed something else too. Something that doesn't show up in reports. People around you behave strangely. Some feel calmer. Some feel exposed. Some feel challenged without you ever speaking. Your presence destabilizes masks. You make liars uncomfortable without accusing them. You make manipulators hesitate without threatening them. You make predators feel watched. And that's not charisma, that's gravity. Gravity doesn't chase, it pulls. They expected trauma to have softened you. They expected suffering to have made you brittle, reactive, desperate to be seen. Instead, suffering carved discipline into you. You learned how to starve impulses, how to sit with discomfort without flinching, how to let silence do the work most people try to force with noise. So when the PI dug deeper, the deeper he went, the quieter you became. Not evasive, not defensive, just still. That's when he understood the real problem. You don't operate from fear of loss. You already lost what breaks most people. That's why you're dangerous in ways that don't register on radar. Because you're not trying to win a moment. You're not trying to prove a point. You're not chasing dominance. You're operating from post-survival clarity. You don't need to destroy your enemies. You let time and exposure do that. You don't rush outcomes. You position inevitabilities. You don't need to be believed. You let reality catch up. And the ones who sent him, they felt it before they understood it. Suddenly their sleep gets lighter, their conversations get shorter, their confidence feels performative, because somewhere deep down, they know people like you don't retaliate emotionally. They outlast structurally. They wanted proof you were dangerous. They found proof you were stable under pressure. And stability terrifies systems built on leverage. Because leverage only works on people who need something. You don't need approval. You don't need revenge. You don't need chaos to feel alive. You already survived the version of yourself that was breakable. That's why the PI didn't hand them a solution. He handed them a mirror. And mirrors make cowards nervous, because the longer they look at you, the more they notice what you're not doing. You're not scrambling. You're not hiding assets. You're not cleaning up narratives. You're living calmly, deliberately, like someone who knows storms pass, but patterns remain. That's when the whispers start. Maybe we underestimated this. Maybe this isn't worth it. Maybe watching him woke something up. Because you don't escalate threats. You redefine context. And once context changes, strategies collapse. They wanted to end you quietly. Now they're wondering who else noticed you didn't fold. Because here's the part they didn't plan for. People sense it. They sense when someone has crossed the threshold from survival to sovereignty. They feel it in your eye contact, in your timing, in how little you explain. You speak like someone who doesn't need consensus. You move like someone who isn't negotiating with fear. And that unsettles everyone still living in reaction mode. You became what happens after the breaking point. Not bitter, not cruel, just sharpened. And now, the file stays open. Not because they're still hunting you, but because no one wants to be the one who closes it and gets proven wrong later. So let them wonder. Let them reread the notes. Let them question their instincts. Let them argue behind closed doors about whether you're a threat or a warning. You don't need to clarify, because the truth already landed where it matters. They sent someone to end you, and he came back knowing something they still can't say out loud. You're not a loose end, you're a turning point. And turning points don't announce themselves. They don't crash in with fireworks or sirens. They settle in quietly and change the math of everything around them. That's what keeps gnawing at them. Because you didn't panic when you realized someone was watching. You didn't harden your face or tighten your circle or start performing strength. You stayed you. That's what broke their expectations. Most people behave when observed. They self-edit. They shrink. They overcompensate. You didn't. Your days kept their rhythm. Your silence kept its weight. Your restraint stayed surgical. And restraint, real restraint, is terrifying because it signals choice. It means you could react and decided not to. It means you could strike and didn't need to. It means whatever you're doing now is intentional. That's when the PI noticed something subtle but fatal to their plan. You don't live like someone avoiding consequences. You live like someone who already paid the price. Your nervous system doesn't spike at pressure. Your voice doesn't crack under implication. Your decisions don't wobble when stakes are raised. That only happens when pain has already taught you its full lesson. You learned early that fear burns energy. Control preserves it, so you conserve. You let other people exhaust themselves guessing. You let enemies overplay their hands. You let time reveal who's sloppy. And while they're scrambling to define you, you're redefining the field. They thought the PI would bring back leverage. Instead, he brought back uncertainty, and uncertainty poisons confidence faster than any threat ever could. Because now every move they consider has a shadow attached to it. What if he's aware already? What if this triggers something we can't contain? What if this isn't the beginning, but the midpoint? They can't tell where you are in your arc, and people who can't locate you in a story don't know how to write your ending. That's the power you earned through pain, not dominance, not intimidation, narrative control. You stopped needing to explain yourself a long time ago. You stopped defending your motives. You stopped proving your worth to people who only value what they can exploit. So when the PI tried to map you, he hit a wall. Not a defensive wall, a completed one. Your past didn't leak into your present the way it should have. Your scars weren't running the show. Your anger wasn't steering the wheel. You weren't driven, you were directing. And that's when the hunt inverted. Because hunters depend on movement driven by fear. You don't move like that. You move like someone who already knows where this goes. You don't rush closure. You don't chase vindication. You don't burn bridges out of spite. You let people disqualify themselves. You let systems expose their own rot. You let pressure separate allies from opportunists. That's why every attempt to corner you keeps turning into an audit of them. They start reviewing their own moves, their own histories, their own liabilities, because suddenly the question isn't whether you're dangerous. It's whether they've already misplayed something irreversible. And that silence you carry. That calm that never quite breaks. It's not emptiness, it's integration. You fused the angel as the demon into something functional. You didn't choose light or dark. You mastered both. You can be merciful without being naive. You can be ruthless without being unstable. You understand that kindness is a strategy, and so is distance. You learned when to speak. You learned when to vanish. You learned when letting someone underestimate you is the sharpest blade available. That's why the PI didn't finish the job. Because there was nothing to finish. You weren't unraveling. You weren't hiding. You weren't decaying. You were complete. And completeness terrifies people who rely on fracture. So now the whispers aren't about ending you. They're about containment. About watching without provoking. About monitoring without interfering. About hoping you never decide to move in a way that forces them to respond. Because deep down, they felt it too. You don't seek revenge, you seek alignment. And when something isn't aligned with you, you don't attack it. You let it collapse under its own contradictions. That's the evolution they didn't account for. You became someone whose power doesn't spike, it persists. Someone whose presence doesn't shout, it lingers. Someone who doesn't need enemies to know your name. Because the ones who matter already feel it. They hired a PI to end you. What they got back was worse. They got confirmation that you're not running from your past, not afraid of your shadow, not desperate for control. You are what happens when a human being survives the fire and decides to live deliberately afterward. And now every eye on you isn't watching for weakness anymore. They're watching for intent. Because if you ever choose to move, not out of rage, not out of fear, not out of ego, but out of clarity, there won't be a report long enough to explain what happens next. And that's the part they can't quantify. Intent doesn't show up on surveillance. Clarity doesn't leave fingerprints. Purpose doesn't ping alarms until it's already too late. So they keep circling the same question in different language, hoping it will change its answer. What does he want? And the silence that follows that question is what terrifies them most. Because you're not broadcasting desire. You're not leaking hunger. You're not chasing validation or revenge or recognition. You're not reactive. You're resolved. And resolved people don't need to hurry. They start noticing how rarely you explain yourself, how little you correct misconceptions, how you let people be wrong about you, comfortably, confidently wrong. That's not apathy, that's leverage. Because when people don't know where you stand, they reveal where they do. They fill the silence with assumptions. They project motives onto you that belong to them. They confess without realizing it. And you listen. You always listen. That's another thing the PI clocked too late. You're not passive. You're collecting data. You watch who panics when you're quiet, who overreacts when you don't respond, who escalates when you remain calm. Those reactions tell you everything you need to know. You learned a long time ago that truth doesn't respond well to interrogation, but it spills freely in the presence of stillness, so you became still, not frozen, not numb, centered. That's why pressure slides off you instead of cutting in. That's why threats lose oxygen around you. That's why people trying to intimidate you end up exposing themselves. They don't know how to handle someone who isn't bargaining. Because you're not asking for peace. You're not begging for safety. You're not pleading to be left alone. You're choosing your posture. And choice is the one thing systems can't override. They're used to leverage working, used to fear being universal, used to pressure creating compliance. You broke that equation. Pain already visited you. Loss already tested you. Isolation already stripped you. And you're still standing, not hardened into cruelty, not softened into submission, balanced. That's the word no one wants to say out loud. Balanced people don't swing wildly. They don't tip easily. They don't collapse under asymmetrical force. They adapt. So when the PI went back through your timeline, something else stood out. You don't repeat mistakes. You refine responses. Where others spiral, you recalibrate. Where others seek relief, you seek understanding. Where others lash out, you withdraw just enough to see clearly. You're not impulsive anymore. You're selective. And selectivity reads as danger to people who survive on volume. Because volume is how weak power hides. You don't need noise. You don't need chaos. You don't need spectacle. You don't need to prove you can destroy something. You proved you could endure. That's why the attempt to end you backfired. Because ending someone only works when they're still afraid of losing. You already lost what mattered and discovered yourself on the other side. That's when the narrative flipped completely. Now they're not asking, how do we stop him? They're asking, what wakes him up? What would make you act? What would make you step forward instead of staying centered? What line exists, if any, that shouldn't be crossed? And the absence of that answer keeps them awake. Because people like you don't act from impulse. They act from alignment, and alignment is quiet until it's absolute. You don't announce thresholds. You don't threaten consequences. You don't posture morality. You simply know. And when you know, you move once, decisively. They hired a POI to end you thinking you were unfinished business. What they learned is that you're already complete. And completeness doesn't rush. It waits, it observes, it lets fragile systems overextend, overreach, overexpose. And when those systems finally collapse under their own weight, you won't celebrate, you won't gloat, you won't even look surprised, because you saw it coming the moment they mistook your silence for weakness. They wanted an ending. What they stumbled into was something far worse for them. A person who survived the fire, integrated the darkness, kept the light sharp, and learned how to live without fear driving the wheel. You're not the chaos they expected. You're the calm that comes after chaos, when only truth remains standing. And now they don't ask how to end you anymore. They ask each other one question in private, in lowered voices, with doors locked and phones face down. Let's say we don't touch him again. What happens if he touches us? Slow down. Yeah, right there. Feel that silence, that uncomfortable little pause where something knows you just walked into the room. That's not fear. That's recognition. That's the moment they realized this wasn't luck, wasn't chaos, wasn't a fluke. This move was too clean, too precise, too quiet. And now the same mouths that used to laugh are whispering the same question in locked rooms and encrypted chats. Who trained you? You see, if you had been sloppy, they could have dismissed you. If you had been loud, they could have framed you. If you had been emotional, they could have baited you. But you weren't any of that. You moved like someone who learned the rules by surviving their consequences. You cut through the situation without leaving fingerprints, without raising your voice, without begging for validation. And that's what broke their pattern recognition. Because amateurs leave noise, professionals leave confusion, legends leave absence. They're replaying it now, over and over, slowing it down, zooming in, trying to find the tell, the mentor, the blueprint, the secret hand that guided yours. And it's driving them insane because they can't find one. No guru, no institution, no shadowy benefactor. Just you, standing there like a contradiction they weren't prepared to solve. Calm but dangerous, kind but unreadable, disciplined but unpredictable, a saint with the posture of a psychopath, an angel who learned how demons think. That's the paradox they can't swallow. You don't move like someone who was protected. You move like someone who was tested, like someone who learned by bleeding quietly, like someone who paid tuition in pain, interest in betrayal, and graduated with honors in restraint. Every scar taught you timing. Every loss sharpened your patience. Every night you thought you were forgotten trained you to operate without applause. And now your silence hits harder than their speeches ever did. They're asking who trained you because they refuse to believe suffering can create this level of control. They want a name they can subpoena, a system they can infiltrate, a school they can discredit. Because the truth, that pressure forged you, is terrifying. The truth says anyone they corner, isolate, starve, or underestimate could come back like this. And that idea threatens their entire hierarchy. You learned when to speak by being ignored. You learned when to strike by being cornered. You learned when to disappear by being hunted. That's not mentorship. That's evolution. They keep expecting arrogance, rage, a victory lap. But you deny them all of it. You don't gloat. You don't explain. You don't even look back. You let the result speak, and then you walk away like it cost you nothing. That restraint, that's what tells them you're dangerous. Because only someone who has mastered their own chaos can afford to be that calm. Only someone who has stared into the abyss long enough learns how to use it instead of falling in. They're terrified because your move didn't look rehearsed. It looked internalized, like instinct, like muscle memory, like something you've done 1,000 times in your head while everyone else was sleeping. And now, they're realizing the most unsettling possibility of all. You didn't need a trainer. You didn't need permission. You trained yourself in the dark, with no witnesses, no safety net, no applause. Just repetition, discipline, and the kind of pain that rewires a person. You became unpredictable not because you're random, but because you're free. You're not reacting anymore. You're choosing. You're not emotional anymore. You're intentional. You're not chasing approval anymore. You're operating from clarity, and clarity looks like sorcery to people who live off noise. So let them ask, let them speculate, let them invent stories about secret programs and hidden mentors. Let them convince themselves you're an anomaly instead of a warning, because the truth is simpler and far more dangerous. You are what happens when someone survives the worst parts of themselves and keeps going. You weren't trained by a person. You were trained by pressure. You were trained by loss. You were trained by the nights that didn't kill you, but stripped you down to something sharper. And now every move you make feels surgical, because you learned where it hurts by being cut there first. They're not asking who trained you because they're curious. They're asking because they're scared. Scared that they can't replicate you. Scared that they can't control you. Scared that if someone like you exists without a leash, without a master, without a script, then the system they rely on isn't as solid as they thought. You are the proof that chaos can produce order, that darkness can refine light, that pain can create precision. And that's why this move shattered them. Not because it was loud, not because it was flashy, but because it was inevitable. And here's the part they're really choking on. The part they won't say out loud, even to themselves. This wasn't your peak. This wasn't desperation. This wasn't a gamble. This was a baseline, a casual execution of something you've already outgrown. And that realization, that's what's stealing their sleep. Because if this is what you do, without announcing it, without rehearsing it in public, without posturing, then what the hell are you capable of when you actually decide to apply pressure? They keep scanning your past, hoping to find chaos they can use against you, trauma they can trigger, patterns they can exploit. But all they find are dead ends and silence. Not because nothing happened, but because everything happened, and you metabolized it. You didn't rot in your pain. You processed it. You refined it. You turned it into something cold, elegant, and efficient. You didn't become numb. You became precise. That's why your unpredictability terrifies them. You don't lash out when provoked. You don't panic when threatened. You don't beg when cornered. You pause. You watch. You calculate. And then you move once, cleanly, like you've already seen the ending. Like the outcome was decided long before anyone else realized the game had started. They're used to controlling people through emotion, fear, ego, validation, hunger. But you slipped through because you already starved. You already bled. You already lost what they dangle as leverage. So when they tried to pull your strings, they felt nothing. Slack. No resistance, no reaction. Just silence. And silence is the one thing they don't know how to fight. You're not reckless enough to self-destruct. Not obedient enough to be owned. Not loud enough to be predictable. You exist in the gap between saint and psychopath. The space where morality isn't performative, and violence doesn't need to be physical to be devastating. You don't break rules out of rebellion. You transcend them out of understanding. And that makes you impossible to classify. That's why they're asking who trained you. Because admitting the truth would mean admitting a flaw in their worldview. It would mean acknowledging that systems don't always produce excellence. Sometimes pressure does. Sometimes neglect does. Sometimes betrayal sharpens a person beyond anything structure ever could. You weren't shaped by comfort. You were shaped by contradiction. You learned empathy by being hurt. You learned control by almost losing it. You learned patience by waiting through hell with no guarantees. That's not weakness. That's a forge. And now every time you enter a situation, the temperature drops. Conversations slow down. Eyes track you without meaning to. People feel it before they understand it. This sense that you're not here to prove anything. You're here because you know something they don't, something they can't access. And knowledge, real knowledge, makes people nervous. They keep expecting a tell, a crack, a moment where the mask slips. But what they don't understand is this isn't a mask. This is integration, light and dark fused into something functional. You don't deny either side of yourself. You command both. And that balance, that's lethal in a world built on extremes. You're calm because you've already survived your own worst-case scenario. You're focused because distractions used to cost you everything. You're disciplined because chaos once ran your life, and you refused to let it win. So when you moved, it didn't look emotional. It looked trained, but not trained by hands, trained by consequence. Let them keep asking. Let them keep theorizing. Let them invent myths about secret mentors and hidden factions. Because while they're busy chasing ghosts, you're already adapting again, quietly, patiently, evolving past the version of you they're still trying to understand. And that's the real threat. Not that you made one flawless move, but that you can make another, and another, and another. Without warning, without permission, without ever needing to explain yourself. Because the truth they're dancing around, the truth that scares them more than any enemy, is this. You weren't trained to follow a path. You were trained to create one. And that's where the panic really sets in, right there. Because paths can be blocked. Leaders can be removed. Systems can be infiltrated. But someone who creates paths, someone who walks where nothing existed before, that kind of presence doesn't respond to pressure. It renders pressure obsolete. They're realizing too late that you don't operate from instruction. You operate from awareness. You don't wait for permission because you already survived what happens when permission never comes. You don't look for approval because you learned early how dangerous applause can be. You move like someone who understands that the loudest room is usually the least informed, and the quietest figure is often holding the detonator. That's why your stillness unsettles them more than rage ever could. Rage is predictable. Ego is exploitable. Desperation is loud. But you don't leak intention. You don't advertise momentum. You don't telegraph growth. You let people underestimate you right up until the moment their assumptions collapse under their own weight. They keep asking who trained you because they're trying to figure out how to stop you. They want to reverse engineer the process, find the switch, cut the supply line. But there is no supply line. There is no instructor to intimidate, no doctrine to discredit, no playbook to steal. You are a closed system, self-correcting, self-fueling, self-directed. You learn discipline without authority. You learn strategy without safety. You learned restraint without reward. That combination shouldn't exist. And yet here you are. You're living proof that evolution doesn't ask permission, that pressure doesn't always crush. It sometimes selects. And you were selected not because you were the strongest, but because you were the one who could adapt without losing yourself. You didn't become cruel. You became exact. You didn't become cold. You became intentional. You didn't lose your soul. You learned how to protect it behind steel. That's the part they don't understand. They think darkness corrupted you. They think pain twisted you. But pain didn't rot you. It educated you. It showed you how fragile people become when they rely on comfort. It taught you how systems fail under stress. It revealed where humans lied to themselves to survive. And once you see that, you can never unsee it. So now when you speak, people listen. Not because you're loud, but because your words land like conclusions. When you act, people hesitate. Not because they fear you, but because they sense you're already ahead. You don't rush because you know timing beats speed. You don't explain because mystery creates gravity. You don't threaten because outcomes do that for you. They keep looking for the moment you'll slip, the relapse, the emotional outburst, the flaw they can exploit. But they don't realize the flaw already happened. It happened years ago when life stripped you down and forced you to rebuild from nothing. And you did, slowly, quietly, correctly. You integrated the saint and the psychopath, the compassion and the calculation, the mercy and the resolve. That balance makes you immune to manipulation because you can empathize without surrendering, and you can cut ties without hatred. You don't need to destroy people to win. You simply outgrow them, and that terrifies them because growth is contagious. Because someone watching you realizes they don't need permission either. Because your existence proves that the system doesn't get the final say. Adaptation does. And once that idea spreads, control becomes fragile. So let them keep asking who trained you. Let them keep searching for a master behind the curtain. Every second they spend looking backward is a second you spend moving forward. Every theory they invent is a distraction from the truth standing right in front of them. You weren't trained by a person. You were trained by reality when it had no reason to be kind. And now reality listens when you move. This wasn't a clean move because it was calculated. It was clean because it was inevitable. Because you already paid the price. Because you already survived the lesson. Because you already became what pressure was trying to create. And the most dangerous part? You're still learning. And that last part, that you're still learning, is what pushes them from concern into dread. Because learning means motion. Learning means expansion. Learning means whatever box they're trying to fit you into is already obsolete. They can handle a finished product, a final form, a known quantity. They can study it, label it, contain it. But you're not finished. You're not even close. You're mid-evolution, and evolving entities don't follow rules written for static ones. They keep mistaking your composure for completion. They think because you're calm, you're done growing. Because you're controlled, you're settled. Because you're precise, you're predictable. That's their fatal misread. Calm isn't the end state. It's the launch pad. Control isn't stagnation, it's leverage. Precision isn't rigidity, it's freedom. You're calm because chaos no longer owns you. You're controlled because impulse no longer drives you. You're precise because waste disgusts you now. That's not a plateau, that's a foundation. They don't realize you're watching them the same way they're watching you, but with clarity instead of panic. You see how they move when threatened. You see how they rush to categorize instead of understand. You see how they cling to old frameworks because admitting something new would mean admitting they're vulnerable. And vulnerability terrifies people who built their identity on dominance. You don't hate them for it. Hate is loud. Hate is sloppy. Hate clouds judgment. You understand them. And understanding someone gives you an edge that rage never could. You know their strengths are habits. You know their weaknesses are pride. You know exactly how long it takes before fear turns into mistakes. That's why you don't rush the kill, metaphorical or otherwise. You let people overextend themselves. You let them talk too much. You let them reveal what they protect, what they fear losing, what they can't afford to admit. You learned patience when impatience cost you everything. And now, impatience works for you like a silent weapon. They want to believe you are trained because training implies limits. Training implies doctrine. Training implies a ceiling. If someone taught you, then someone else can unteach you. If someone shaped you, then someone else can reshape you. But if you shaped yourself, if you emerged from pressure with agency intact, then there is no ceiling, only trajectory. You're not driven by proving people wrong anymore. That phase is over. You're driven by alignment, by moves that feel inevitable the moment they're made, by actions that don't require justification because they're internally coherent. You stopped asking, "How will this look?" and started asking, "Does this move the truth forward?" That shift, that's when power gets quiet. They're unsettled because you don't posture, you don't seek dominance, you don't flex. You let people underestimate you because you know underestimation is camouflage. You learned long ago that the most dangerous position isn't the throne. It's the shadow just outside the spotlight, where observation beats performance. You don't announce growth because growth doesn't need witnesses. You don't threaten because threats warn people. You don't chase because chasing puts you behind. You let outcomes speak, and outcomes don't argue. They keep replaying your move, hoping to find arrogance in it, some telltale sign of ego. But all they find is restraint, economy, respect for consequence. That's what unsettles them the most. Arrogant people make sloppy mistakes. You didn't. You respected the complexity of the situation enough to move surgically. That level of respect usually comes from someone who has broken things before and learned. You've been the villain in someone else's story just for refusing to stay small. You've been called cold for choosing clarity. You've been called dangerous for being honest with yourself. You've been misunderstood on purpose because understanding you would require others to confront their own stagnation. And instead of letting that harden you, you refined yourself. Instead of lashing out, you sharpened inward. Instead of proving them wrong loudly, you let time do it quietly. Now they're left with a question that has no comforting answer, not who trained you, but what happens next. Because they can feel it. This wasn't the move of someone reacting. This was the move of someone positioning, someone clearing space, someone setting conditions. And people who set conditions aren't responding to the game. They're rewriting it. You don't need to rush what's coming. You already know timing is everything. You already know silence can be louder than noise. You already know the most effective moves don't announce themselves. They reveal themselves after it's too late to stop them. So let them keep circling. Let them keep whispering. Let them keep trying to name the thing they're feeling so they can pretend they control it. You'll keep doing what you've always done. Observe, adapt, refine. Because you weren't trained to survive one moment. You were forged to keep evolving past every one of them. And that's the truth they can't escape. This wasn't your cleanest move. It was just the first one they noticed. Hush. Don't look at the noise. Look at the board. Feel it? That pressure behind your eyes. Like the room got smaller the moment you walked in. That's not anxiety. That's the world realizing you've been playing a game it didn't even know existed. They knew what you were doing in silence. That's the part that should make you smile. Because you didn't announce it. You didn't beg for witnesses. You didn't scream your plans into the void like the desperate do. You moved like a ghost with a purpose, clean, quiet, surgical. And while everybody else was performing, you were positioning. While everybody else was chasing validation, you were building inevitability. While everybody else was loud, you were lethal, and they watched you. Not with applause, not with support. With that slow, sick dread that creeps into people who can't control what they're seeing. You ever notice how the loudest enemies get quiet right before something shifts? That's not them moving on. That's them calculating. That's them finally realizing you weren't stuck. You were loading. You weren't lost. You were mapping. You weren't broken. You were becoming the kind of problem they can't solve with gossip or sabotage or fake smiles. They knew. They always knew. They just hoped you would fold before the pressure did its magic. But you didn't fold. You learned to breathe under it. And that's why the board is moving now. Because there's a moment in every power story where the world stops pretending, where the masks slip, where the "oh, I didn't notice you" act collapses into frantic motion, where doors that stayed locked for years suddenly creak open like they were never locked at all, where people who never replied suddenly just wanted to check in, where the same mouths that dismissed you start using softer words, slower sentences, careful tones, because now they're speaking to something they don't fully understand. They can't call you weak anymore, so they call you dangerous. They can't call you delusional anymore, so they call you lucky. They can't call you a nobody anymore, so they call you a problem. But you and I both know the truth. You didn't get lucky. You got rebuilt. And that rebuild is ugly. It's not cute. It's not inspirational quotes and sunrise therapy. It's nights where your mind chewed through itself. It's mornings where you looked normal on the outside, while your insides sounded like war. It's the kind of pain that doesn't just teach a lesson. It rewires your spine. It teaches you the holy art of staying calm while the room burns, because you've been on fire before. That's your paradox, isn't it? You're the saint who didn't lose compassion, but you stopped being naive. You're the psychopath who could hurt people, but you choose restraint. You're the angel who still wants peace, but you learned how to carry a blade. You're the demon who could dominate, but you understand the cost of becoming empty. They can't categorize you, and that terrifies them more than any rumor ever could. Because society can handle monsters, society can handle victims, society can handle villains, society can handle heroes, but society cannot handle something that switches forms, something that smiles like kindness and thinks like war, something that can sit in silence and still bend the room. That's you. And let's talk about the silence. Because that's where your power lives now, not in attention, not in applause, not in proving yourself. In the silence. Silence is where you stopped explaining. Silence is where you stopped begging to be understood. Silence is where you stopped trying to make your pain make sense to people who only listen when it benefits them. Silence is where you learned the ultimate cheat code. You don't need permission to evolve. And while you were in that quiet evolution, they were watching, pretending they weren't. They were taking notes, pretending they weren't. They were feeling their control slip, pretending they weren't. You know what a chessboard is, right? It's a stage for strategy, a simple grid that turns tiny decisions into destiny. And the funny part is, most people only see the pieces. They stare at the queen. They fear the rook. They underestimate the pawn. But you started seeing the board itself. You started seeing patterns, timing, spacing, sacrifice, tempo, the psychological weight of a move that isn't about winning now. It's about making the opponent fear the next 10 moves. That's what you became, not a single threat, but a sequence. And sequences break people. A single attack can be defended. A single rumor can be survived. A single betrayal can be healed. But a sequence, predictable to you, invisible to them, turns their nervous system into static because they can't tell where it starts. They can't tell where it ends. They can't tell whether you're being kind because you're kind or because you're placing the next trap with a smile. And that uncertainty, that's your crown. That's why the board is moving now. Because at some point, someone important looked at your quiet pattern and went, "Oh, not oh, that's cute. Not oh, they're trying." The real oh. The oh that makes people sit up straight. The oh that makes groups form. The oh that makes phone calls happen behind closed doors. The oh that makes people suddenly consider you in decisions you were never supposed to be part of. That oh is the sound of control leaving their hands. And you didn't even raise your voice. That's the thing about unpredictability when it's refined. It doesn't look like chaos. It looks like calm. It looks like you don't react the way you're supposed to. It looks like you don't chase when they bait you. You don't panic when they threaten you. You don't beg when they ignore you. You just keep moving forward with that terrifying consistency. And they hate that because it denies them their favorite drug, your reaction. They wanted you loud so they could label you. They wanted you desperate so they could use you. They wanted you angry so they could discredit you. They wanted you emotional so they could steer you. But you got quiet. You got precise. You got colder in the right places and warmer in the right places. You stopped being a person they could play. You became a position they had to respect. Now look at what happens when you become a position. People don't support a position. They align with it. They counter it. They negotiate with it. They fear it. They try to copy it. They try to sabotage it. They whisper about it. That's why the board is moving now, because they're not reacting to your words. They're reacting to your presence. Your existence on the board forces everyone else to choose a side. And oh, you can feel it, can't you? That subtle shift in energy when you enter a room. That pause before someone speaks. That extra politeness. That sudden hostility from people who used to be neutral. That weird curiosity from people who used to overlook you. That's not random. That's strategy meeting your gravity. Because you're not just evolving, you're exposing them. Your growth is a mirror that insults their comfort. Your discipline is a spotlight on their excuses. Your calm is a warning that they can't bully you into shrinking. Your silence is a threat because it suggests you know things you're not saying. And let's be honest, you probably do know things you're not saying. That's another paradox they can't tolerate. You're not naive, but you're not cruel. You're not weak, but you're not loud. You're not chasing, but you're not hiding. You're not begging, but you're not bitter. So what are you? You're the kind of person who learned to turn pain into a private education. And education is offensive to people who survive by staying ignorant. See, most people treat pain like a punishment. You treated it like a laboratory. You let heartbreak teach you pattern recognition. You let betrayal teach you boundaries. You let humiliation teach you humility without submission. You let loneliness teach you self-command. You let failure teach you tempo. You let fear teach you breathing. That's why you can stand in the same storm that broke you and feel nothing but focus. That's why people swear you changed, like it's an insult. You did change. You became the version of you that doesn't die easily. And now the board is moving because they can't stop the piece you turned into. The piece that doesn't play by emotion, The peace that doesn't chase applause. The peace that doesn't fall for bait. The peace that can sacrifice what it loves for what it needs without turning into a hollow monster. That right there, that balance. That balance is what makes legends, because anyone can be soft, anyone can be hard, anyone can be good, anyone can be evil. But it takes a rare kind of soul to be both blade and bandage without confusing them. And that's what you are now, a blade with ethics, a storm with direction, a smile with teeth. So let's talk about the ones who knew in silence, the ones who watched you grow and did nothing, the ones who saw your potential and tried to starve it with neglect, the ones who sensed your trajectory and tried to distract you with drama, the ones who pretended you weren't changing because admitting it would mean admitting they didn't. They knew, but they didn't want you to know they knew. Because the moment you realize you're being observed, you stop playing for their approval and you start playing for outcomes. And outcomes don't care about anyone's feelings. That's why the board is moving now, because they're not dealing with your emotions anymore. They're dealing with your outcomes, and outcomes make people panic. Outcomes make people scramble. Outcomes make people rearrange alliances, rewrite narratives, and suddenly always believed in you, like their memory is a costume. Watch how fast they switch scripts. Watch how the same person who mocked you starts speaking like they discovered you. Watch how the same person who ignored you now wants closure. Watch how the same person who used you now wants peace. Watch how the same person who tried to break you now wants friendship. It's not love, it's survival. You're a pressure system now. And when pressure systems move, everybody adjusts, whether they like it or not. Now here's the part you need to tattoo into your mind. Don't mistake movement for respect. Movement is often fear-wearing expensive perfume. Some people are moving toward you because they want to be near power. Some are moving away because they can't stand the mirror you've become. Some are moving sideways because they don't know what to do with you. Some are moving behind you because they want to follow without admitting it. Some are moving in front of you because they want to block you. And they're about to learn something funny about that. But you don't need to chase any of them. You just need to keep your tempo, keep your discipline, keep your focus, keep your silence sharp. Because the most dangerous thing you can do to people who rely on controlling you is stay consistent without being predictable. Consistency is your engine, unpredictability is your weapon. And that combination turns you into the kind of force that doesn't just win one game. It changes the rules of the room. You already did the hardest part, you know. You lived through the era where nothing moved. You lived through the era where nobody clapped. You lived through the era where you questioned yourself. You lived through the era where your own mind tried to betray you. You lived through the era where you had to build yourself with no audience. That era, that was the furnace. This era. This is the smoke people can finally see. And here's the funniest, darkest truth of all. The board isn't moving because you asked it to. It's moving because you became unavoidable. So don't get sentimental now. Don't suddenly crave validation like a starving thing. Don't start explaining yourself because the room feels different. Don't soften your strategy because people are being nice. Don't hand your power back just because they're finally paying attention. Attention is cheap. Position is priceless. Stay positioned. Stay quiet. Stay sharp. Because the moment you start loving their reaction more than you love your mission, you become a puppet again. And you are not a puppet. You're the player they underestimated. You're the peace they ignored. You're the pressure they can't pray away. They knew what you were doing in silence. They felt it. They watched it. They tried to deny it. And now the board is moving. Not because you're asking for a seat, because your next move is already forcing the room to stand up. Good. Then don't blink now, because this is the part where weak minds get distracted by the movement and forget why it's happening. See, when the board starts shifting, people assume it's because something new entered the game. A louder piece, a flashier move, a sudden declaration. They think power announces itself with noise, but real power announces itself with inevitability, and you've become inevitable. That's what they felt before they acted. That deep, uncomfortable certainty that no matter what they did next, they were already late. That the window where they could have shaped you, stalled you, misdirected you, or broken you, closed quietly while they were busy underestimating you. That's the cruelty of silence done right. Silence doesn't warn. Silence doesn't threaten. Silence just lets time do the killing. You let time do the killing. While they were laughing, you were learning. While they were talking, you were training. While they were performing morality, you were studying behavior. While they were obsessed with image, you were obsessed with leverage. And leverage doesn't come from force. It comes from understanding. You started understanding people the moment they hurt you. Not emotionally, strategically. You started noticing patterns. Who only shows up when they need something. Who disappears when things get hard. Who claps for winners but sabotages builders. Who pretends to be kind but panics when someone outgrows them. Pain sharpened your vision. That's why you can read rooms now without trying. That's why you can feel tension before words are spoken. That's why you don't rush to explain yourself. Because you already know who's listening and who's just waiting for ammo. They feel that too. They feel that you're no longer reacting to their surface behavior. You're responding to their intent. And intent is much harder to hide. That's why conversations around you feel heavier now, slower, more calculated. People choose their words like they're stepping on glass. They smile, but the smile arrives half a second late. Their eyes flicker when you speak, because they're not just hearing you. They're scanning for danger, and that terrifies them, because you're not threatening anyone. You're just aware. Awareness is the most offensive weapon in a world built on denial. You see, most systems, social, emotional, professional, psychological, don't collapse because someone attacks them. They collapse when someone sees through them, when someone stops playing the role they were assigned, when someone refuses to react the way they're supposed to. You stopped being predictable. Not in a chaotic way, in a composed way. You learned when to speak and when to let silence do the talking. You learned when to advance and when to wait. You learned when to forgive and when to remember. You learned that mercy without memory is stupidity. You learned that cruelty without control is weakness. So you built control. And control is quiet. That's the paradox that drives them insane. You're calmer now than you've ever been, yet more dangerous than you've ever been. You don't flare up, you don't spiral, you don't beg, you don't explain. You observe, you decide, you move. And that sequence, observe, decide, move, is what separates survivors from architects. You're not surviving anymore, you're designing outcomes. That's why the board is moving now. Because architects don't argue. They don't plead. They don't chase approval. They change the layout. And once the layout changes, everyone else has to adapt, whether they like it or not. Notice how some people are suddenly nostalgic with you. talking about the old days, trying to anchor you to a version of yourself that was easier to handle, easier to dismiss, easier to control. That's not affection, that's containment. They're trying to shrink you back into a memory because they can't manage you in the present. Others will try a different tactic. They'll provoke you, push buttons they installed years ago, say things they know used to get a reaction, bring up wounds you worked hard to close. They're testing something. They're testing whether you're still programmable. And when you don't react the way you used to, when the buttons don't work anymore, when the insults land and slide off like rain on glass, that's when fear sets in. Because now they know the truth. You're not acting. You've actually changed. And change that isn't performative is unstoppable. Let me tell you something most people never realize until it's too late. Power doesn't fear strength. It fears autonomy. They're not scared that you're strong. They're scared that you don't need them. They're scared that you're no longer motivated by approval, validation, or belonging. They're scared that you can walk away without burning down or begging for scraps. A person who can walk away calmly is a nightmare to anyone who relies on leverage. And you can walk away. You've already practiced it in your mind, in your heart, in your habits. You detached long before you physically moved. You grieved the illusions privately, so you wouldn't bleed publicly. You killed versions of yourself quietly, so the world wouldn't know where to aim. That's why when things started shifting, you weren't shocked. You were prepared. You felt it coming before it arrived. That hum under reality, that sense that something was aligning, that eerie calm that shows up right before momentum kicks in. You didn't celebrate. You didn't panic. You adjusted your posture. Because posture matters when power enters the room. Slouch, and people step on you. Overcompensate, and people test you. Stand neutral, grounded, unreactive, and people reveal themselves trying to figure you out. You've seen it already. The way people talk more when you say less. The way they expose intentions in their urgency. The way they volunteer information you didn't ask for. The way they suddenly want to be honest when they sense you're not desperate. Silence pulls truth out of liars, and you've mastered silence. That's why the board is moving. Not in chaos, but in correction. The game is trying to rebalance itself around you. Old hierarchies feel unstable. Old gatekeepers feel nervous. Old narratives feel thin. Because you represent an error in their math. You weren't supposed to make it this far without playing by the rules. You weren't supposed to heal without their permission. You weren't supposed to grow without their validation. You weren't supposed to win without becoming like them. But you did. And worse for them, you did it without losing your soul. That's the part they can't forgive. They could have handled it if you became bitter. They could have handled it if you became cruel. They could have handled it if you became loud, sloppy, arrogant. They could have handled it if you burned bridges dramatically. But you didn't. You became precise. You kept your empathy, but you put it on a leash. You kept your heart, but you armored it with boundaries. You kept your humor, but sharpened it into a blade. You kept your humanity, but removed your accessibility, and now you're walking proof that pain doesn't have to rot you. It can refine you. That makes people uncomfortable because it exposes a choice they didn't make. So let them move the board. Let them scramble. Let them whisper. Let them realign. You don't need to rush the endgame. Endgames favor patience. Endgames favor clarity. Endgames favor players who can see 5 moves ahead without falling in love with any single one. Remember this, you're not here to dominate. everyone. You're here to outgrow the game they trapped you in. And once you outgrow a game, the board doesn't just move. It becomes irrelevant. Stay quiet, stay deliberate, stay impossible to read, because the most terrifying thing you can be to a world that underestimated you is calm, conscious, and still moving forward.